And we'll go to the next question from Philagape, who says, if I were to doubt Christianity, I don't, but if he was, it would be because of a lack of holiness. Christians seem to be jerks at the same rate as the world or more. Why is this if we have the Holy Spirit? Are Christians jerks at a higher rate than the world? I don't know if that's true, to be honest. So one of the concerns with how okay, we may not be very good at measuring jerkness in life. The world certainly has different standards for being a good person than Christians do. And so in a sense, you could say, well, if I'm measuring Christians by the world's standards of what is generally, this is a good person, and then I measure the world by those standards, and how do they compare? But what if I measure them by Christian standards of what is a good person? Now, how do they compare Christians versus the world? Now, I'm not weighing in on this. I'm just saying this is something that to me seems very arbitrary. What standards am I using to measure this goodness? Christianity has a very low estimation of the actual goodness of people, very, very low. So Jesus says, you being evil know how to give good gifts to your children. This is something he says in the Sermon on the Mount. One of my favorite verses from Jesus, because it so helpfully destroys false stereotypes about Jesus and his teachings. But this means that Jesus thinks that you giving good things to your kids does not make you good. So like the world standards, you're a better person because you give good gifts to your kids. Jesus talks about people who are outwardly nice and outwardly kind, but inwardly they have all these issues. And that's a big, important measure of goodness on Christian values. Now, the Christian measure of goodness is going to make everybody more of a jerk, to be honest. The worldly measure is going to probably make a lot more people better, at least in your estimation. The other thing is, I don't know if you're really measuring things rightly or if we're just getting more and more biased against Christians here, where it's almost like the Christians, the religious stigma, right? They're just these Christians, these evangelicals. And it's all becoming like spit language against believers. I'm concerned that does happen. I'm not sure that it's true that Christians are more of jerks or even at the same rate than the world, nor do I think I'm in a position to measure those things. I mean, how do you measure this stuff? You're just going off your gut. Okay, so that being said, is there a lack of holiness? I think every Christian has had a lack of holiness. Pretty much every Christian has. The world absolutely has a lack of holiness. But yeah, this issue, I remember seeing people go down this road where they become more and more critical over time of religious people and people in church, and they become less and less critical. And you hear it in their language. Oh, these people in church, they're the problem. Jesus always had a problem with the religious people, which is not actually factually true. It's a distortion. And, I want to hang out with the real people. I'd rather be in the bowling alley. I'd rather be at the bar. I'd rather be in all these other things. There's something going on there that is difficult to put my finger on, that doesn't seem healthy. It seems like a distortion that's going on. And so I've met people like this. I have conversations with people like this. They think, the non-believers I know are nicer, more open people than the believers I know. And we had a conversation not long ago with someone, and then they said this, and then they said, well, of course, there's the fact that, they don't have religious commitments. And so, there's none of that tension. And so they were evaluating people's goodness based on how nice and polite they were. And they thought when you remove the tension of obedience to Jesus, belief in God, the necessity of salvation, it makes it a lot easier to get along with different people. So by that measure, they were like, yeah, non-Christians are kind of godlier. But that's not really a measure for godliness, is it? It's more of a measure for how easy it is to get along in spite of your rejection of God. Anyway, this stuff gets complicated. That would be my thing, is that I think there's complicated things going on in your head. If anybody, Philagape, you or anybody else, started thinking Christians aren't holy enough, you can do one thing to test this a little bit for yourself. Are you personally, you more than anybody else, are you more holy because of Christ? And if your answer to that is no, my answer is maybe you're not really Christian. And if your answer is yes, then I'll say you have at least one big defeater for the idea that being Christian somehow makes you less holy. And it makes little sense. Like if you're an actual follower of Jesus who's like, love your enemies, do good to those who curse you, who hate you, bless them, who doesn't do harm, who lives self-sacrificially and teaches us to follow in his steps, tells us to take care of our neighbor, no matter who they are. Like, how does this not make you a better person if you're genuine about it? I don't know. I guess I find the whole thing confusing.